We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
As always, the opinions expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of Right America Media, its production team, or its management. We have to give you that disclaimer because, God forbid we ruffle somebody's feathers. God forbid we don't ruffle somebody's feathers over the course of 2 hours of live broadcasting. I guess we would be doing something wrong at that point. So welcome to a brand spanking new edition of Granite State Live. It is great to have you along on this Tuesday evening, the 28th day of October 2025. I'm your host, Keith Hansen, heavily armed, as always, the unapologetic contrarian conservative, never apologizing for my toxic white masculinity. As I've said before, my doctors consider it a pre-existing condition since I was born with it. Never apologizing for my Christian faith. And did I mention heavily armed, as always? Always. That's the way it's always going to be. Our call-in number, if you'd like to be a part of tonight's program, 833-603-TALK. That's toll-free, 833-603-8255. And if you'd like to have your mug featured on the program as well, you can do that through live video. Just send an email to granitestatelive@gmail.com. That's granitestatelive@gmail.com. Be sure to put the words video link in the subject line, and the production team will zap that out to you lickety-split.
And I am Julian Aceyard, host of the Blue Collar Intellectual Podcast, and I am here to shatter your preconceived notions handed down to you by academia, the media, and your favorite dipshit influencer. So, let's get into it.
Singular or plural? Singular, or you said influencer. Is there a singular influencer that needs to be debunked?
Oh my God, there's so many. There's so many.
Well, actually, you know what? We'll get into that because I got a question for you.
We just had the Tucker Carlson interview. Just had Matt Walsh.
Yeah, I want to get into that with you here. But first, just want to lay out an outline of the program tonight. So tonight, we're going to be welcoming Tom Murray. He's going to be joining us here. We're going to be talking about something that, it's going to be an interesting topic. Let's just say that. Abatements for property taxes based upon constitutional principle, and specifically statutes and the New Hampshire state constitution. There were some changes that were made. And so are the taxes that you are paying, you think about what your property taxes are. I think our property taxes are somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000. And when you look at it, it's about 80% of that is going to fund public education. Is that constitutional? We're going to have that conversation with Tom Murray and Daniel Richards coming up here in just a little bit. That'll be about 7:30 this evening. And then coming up at 8 o'clock, we're going to be checking in with Nils Gravilius. He's a Los Angeles-based private detective. We're going to be talking about an old, well, not maybe so old, a murder case. If any of you are subscribers to the Crime Junkie podcast or The Deck, podcast, you may be familiar with the Tote family murder. We're going to be talking about that with Nils Gravilius. He's got some new information on that case that we wanted to talk about. And then coming up at 8:30, we're going to be checking in with Mary Graybar, author of Debunking FDR, The Man and the Myths. Does Zohan Mamdani represent, of course, he's the progressive, well, I don't want to say progressive, he's an outright socialist, running for mayor in the once great city of New York. Does he represent the beginning or the end of the Democrat Party? I think that's actually going to be a very interesting conversation. I think we're seeing the Democrat Party transitioning from, and actually I think they're going through their third transition right now. So and what an appropriate term when we're talking about Democrats, right? To talk about transitioning, because that is something that is near and dear to their hearts. So that'll be coming up at 8:30 tonight with Mary Graybar. All right, Julian. Nick Fuentes, the avowed white nationalist, has an interview, does an over an hour long conversation with Tucker Carlson. And I found that kind of surprising because I felt it was almost as if Tucker was validating within certain conservative circles the Nick Fuentes philosophy. Now, Nick Fuentes, it's kind of funny. Nick Fuentes is of Hispanic descent, so it's kind of hard, I guess, to be he is Hispanic.
No, you can be a white Hispanic. It's Spaniards are white.
Okay. But he said that he was actually radicalized to this mindset by listening to, of all people, Mark Levin, which I thought was interesting. Now, Nick Fuentes, I have to say, and having attended many, and it's a soul-sucking experience now, CPACs, both in Florida, Washington, D.C., or I shouldn't say both, but in Washington, D.C., in Orlando, and also in Dallas, Texas. Nick Fuentes attempts to get into CPAC, tries to get onto Media Row, and he lasts all of about 10 minutes before CPAC security is escorting him and his gaggle of 20-something,
Groypers. His followers are called Groypers.
So these, this gaggle of 20-something beta kids that are following him along. He's never, I think, ever made it onto the floor of CPAC. I might be wrong, maybe once or twice, but what are your thoughts on that?
Nick Fuentes represents a group of angry, young, white men who have taken a lot of the talking points that I've warned Republicans about for the past 10 years. We needed to ditch them because they're intellectually inconsistent with our principles. And that if you follow them to their logical conclusion, you end up at where he is. Now,
so give us an example of that, though. Like, what is an example of a principle that they espouse that is antithetical to conservatism?
One of the big ones that I debunk all the time is the 13% of the population is responsible for 53% of the homicides. And I debunk it very simply from conservative side of, we don't prescribe, on this side of the aisle, we believe in individualism. We do not prescribe collective responsibility for the actions of individuals. So saying 50 million, or roughly about 50 million black people are responsible for the homicides committed by about 1%, less than 1% of that population is collective responsibility for the actions of individuals. I don't say white people are all responsible for Nick Fuentes or white nationalists or neo-Nazis or the Holocaust or anything like that, because you're not. You didn't wake up, 100 years ago and decide that you wanted to massacre a bunch of Jews. And doing this is why this group of people have been called the woke right, because their methodology towards looking at race, society, collective responsibility, religion, everything is identical, but the flip side of the coin to the left, and how they obsess over race, religion, all that other stuff. I only focus on this stuff to debunk it so that we can come together as Americans, because you and I have far more in common with each other than what we disagree on and what we don't have in common with each other. And the vast majority of Americans do. this conversation, Dinesh D'Souza has been just railing on it because what we've seen through this popularization. Now, Nick Fuentes, I'm a free speech absolutist, so I'm not saying he needs to be canceled or any of the stuff that happened to him in the past where they took his PayPal, his Venmo, all of his stuff, cast him to the dark corners of the web where he was not able to have a voice or whatever. Because what ended up happening is exactly what I warned was going to happen when you engage in cancel culture. You push all these people off to the corner, along with a whole bunch of people who, yeah, could you say some of these people deserve to be canceled? All right, sure. You know, like actual neo-Nazis, actual friggin' anti-Semites and shit.
I'm going to disagree with you on that for the simple reason that, friend, first of all, with Nick Fuentes, listen, whether you like him, whether you don't like him, whether you don't know who he is, I have to say that he is a textbook definition of tenacity.
Yes, he is.
I mean, he has not given up despite the cancel culture, despite being demonetized and deplatformed and everything. He
emphatically believes everything he says.
He has, and you know what? You may not necessarily agree with his philosophies, but you have to respect the fact that he's not preaching hyperbole. He believes it.
I'm a big fan of respecting your enemy. I mean, in the military, you respect your enemy. If you don't respect your enemy, you take them lightly and you lose.
Fair enough.
So I respect the left to the degree that I don't take them lightly. I don't take him lightly either. But I had warned that when you started canceling regular conservatives and sending them to the dark corners of the web, and when you started castigating all white people as Nazis, all conservatives as Nazis, the power of that word Nazi, same with racism, it loses its power. When you stick them all in the corner, now you create a conversation between the actual extremists and the reasonable people who would have never considered having a conversation with them because now they have a common enemy. And they've been canceled for the same reason, and their common enemy is you. And now the reason why they've been canceled, now that Elon Musk has opened up X, free speech platform and everything, that entire community of everyone that was canceled came back to X going, you were canceled, I was canceled, we're kin. Mind you, he doesn't represent the conservative movement, not at all, but has gone down the since he's come back to X, so many influencers, Daily Wire, Turning Point, The Blaze, all these influencers from Steven Crowder to Charlie Kirk to Tucker Carlson now have humored interviewing these people who have come back to X.
Well, are they running out of people to talk to?
Yes,
and that's why.
Well, these people are flamboyant. They're outrageous, and the shit that they say gets clicks, likes, retweets, shares, and subscribership, and that's the North Star for these people because they're not responsible for winning elections, for winning over voters, for registering voters, for passing policy. They get to say whatever they want, and they get their affirmation or their validation in the amount of views that they get or engagement that they get, and the amount of engagement they get translates directly into money. So they came back here, and now all these influencers who are like, oh, I'm going to have this guy on because he's outrageous. We're going to get clicks out of this. And unfortunately, there's also been Tucker Carlson just spent the entire interview basically agreeing with Nick Fuentes. You got some really good points. Now, some of the good points, right? It is perfectly fine to criticize the Israeli government. It's perfectly fine to criticize Bibi Netanyahu, the governance, or foreign influence in U.S. politics. It is completely fine to be skeptical of AIPAC's influence in U.S. politics and are being tethered to Israel. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is the Jew-spiracies, the idea that Jews are running the world and 15 million Jews are all in on the conspiracy. Common sense says that's not how a conspiracy actually operates. Most conspiracies, very few people are in on it, and everyone else is just trusted to go about their daily business, acting in their own self-interest, and that's how they work.
I want to say one thing, and I want to address something that you said earlier about, some people should be canceled or some people deserve to be canceled. I'm paraphrasing.
No. I mean, you could make the argument. Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm not saying they should. I don't believe in canceling people. I mean, by all means.
Because here's the thing:
if somebody say the crazy thing to my face,
if somebody wants to stand up and espouse, white supremacy and Nazism, go ahead.
Yeah.
go ahead. You're going to make yourself look like an idiot. Maybe you're going to find a base amongst alienated, unintelligent, lacking critical thinking, marginalized people. But those people are going to find their influence anywhere. I mean, go down south and look at the, toothless trailer dwellers that are out there burning crosses and, throwing flour sacks over their head. And,
I wish I had brought up... There's a comedy skit, and I wish I had our producer show it.
You're not going to say Clayton Bigsby.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
I was going to say, that's great.
This was a comedian that said... he made a joke like, white privilege. He goes, I don't believe in white privilege. He goes, why? He goes, name one thing a white person can't have. He goes, an opinion? He goes, a white man can't have an opinion. As soon as a white man in America has an opinion, everybody goes, oh, you're voicing, you're showing your privilege. And he goes, let these people have their opinions, because then when you shove them off to the side and you tell them that they can't have their opinions, they go and suppress that shit. And it gets really, really, really dark. And then they come out every 4 years. Now, his joke was that they come out every 4 years and then they vote for Trump. And he goes, the guy who says all the shit that nobody would say. And they go, that's my fucking guy. Now, in my opinion, no, it gets dark. But when they come out, that darkness comes out too. Now they're dark, they're angry, they've been repressed, they've been suppressed, told that their concerns aren't real. I mean, look at replacement theory. Replacement theory was about Marxism. In reality, it's about replacing the homegrown population in the United States to get a group of people who are willing to accept Marxist rule. People who will trade safety for liberty at a moment's notice, who will trade anything for things, which is what you can do with a mass group of illegal immigrants coming into the country, or a mass wave of immigration of people who are not tethered to the foundations of this country, the foundational principles. Now, they boiled it down to, it's about replacing white people. That's not reality.
You talk about people getting upset and people getting pissed off and they're suppressed. I do a tremendous amount of expert witness work.
Yeah.
So I work with a lot of attorneys. I was speaking with one of the attorneys that I work with down in Connecticut today. And I said, how are things? And he goes, oh man, I don't know. It's like it's a perpetual full moon. And he's telling me about a couple of now he's a firearms attorney and a self-defense attorney. But he also does, some criminal work as well too. And he was just mentioning a couple of cases. A guy pulls a gun on a restaurant clerk who is not bringing his Chinese food up quickly enough. And I mean, hey, listen, pro tip, don't come in between a man and his dim sum. But, I digress. In another case where, it was a road rage incident. And I mean, these are people that have never been involved in criminal actions before. And I said, I got to be honest with you. I said, I think that is really an indication of where we are as a society, that people are so tightly wound that all it takes is just that little push to get an otherwise normal and seemingly law-abiding, I say seemingly, but I mean, these are people that have never had criminal records before. These are people that have never been arrested before.
We're all law-abiding citizens till you break the law.
Until we break a law, right. But I mean, the fact that somebody in their late 40s, would pull a gun on somebody in a road rage incident. Well, first of all, why are we road raging to begin with? That fact that somebody would be so tightly wound that you're not getting my Chinese takeout fast enough, I now have to draw a firearm and engage in felonious assault is kind of mind-boggling. Like, what drives an otherwise sane, rational, and law-abiding citizen to get to the point where they lose? And I don't think it's a conscious decision. I think there's a momentary lapse of reason.
Very simple. When men lack direction and principles, they become self-destructive or outwardly destructive. It is very reason. That's the pinnacle. That's the core of where the fatherlessness issue comes from. And it's not just fatherlessness. We broke this down on my show. It's fathers who are present in the home, but they don't actively parent their children, are just as guilty of this. That's where that CDC report about fathers who actively spend time parenting with their children. Black men spend more time actively parenting their children than any other demographic. why is because we perpetuated this idea that just being a provider was the pinnacle of manhood and fatherhood. It's not. There's a responsibility to actively teach your children the lessons that you were never taught, to teach them about life. You know, that whole saying, we don't pass it to our children in the womb. Mm-hmm. We have to actively teach it to them. Well, when you don't actively teach it to them, you have children that grow up without proper forms of masculinity, who become men who don't understand proper forms of masculinity. They lack self-restraint. They lack direction. They lack the ability to control their emotions. And that is destructive. That's where the suicide epidemic comes from. That's where the violence epidemic comes from. Now, when you have guys like, you extrapolate that, we know that predators prey on weak people who don't have that direction in their life. Gangs do it, cults do it, different criminal organizations, extremists do it the same way.
The Democrat Party has been doing it.
Yes.
I mean, I've devoted so many hours of broadcasting to breaking down how the Democrat Party uses Maslow's hierarchy of needs to appeal to young, disenfranchised, marginalized, alienated youth.
Yes.
And how, conversely, the Republican Party can't learn from that process. And it's not learning a technique of manipulation. Mm-hmm. It's about learning how to capitalize and utilize. And when I say exploit, I don't mean exploit in a negative scheme context. No. I mean maximize the potential that is there.
And inspire. When you have disconnected, disaffected youth, you inspire them towards something. Now, you can inspire them towards something bad, like Hitler did, or you can inspire them towards something good, like serving in the military, like being the greatest generation who stormed the beaches of Normandy. There's two different directions you could take. Not everybody uses the power of the ability of the pulpit and the ability to direct people in a good way. And here's the problem is, now we've talked about on this show, for those who don't know, I talk about race a lot. I'm mixed. I'm biracial. I'm half Italian. I'm half black. Okay. So let's part of me is white. So let me make this very, very clear. White people, white men specifically in this country, have been a villain for a long time, have been made the colloquial and rhetorical villain of the left for a long time. Why? In order to collectivize every other minority group in the country around white men, the male patriarchy, and as Karlin Boroshenko, who came on the show, said, it's not about race, it's about being able to have the white male patriarchy is connected to capitalism. In order to defeat capitalism, you have to defeat the white male patriarchy. Here's the problem, though, is we were focused on white and male. The vast majority of the people who are victimizing conservative white men are liberal white men and liberal white women. They're the ones with the levers of power. Now,
we
how
saw
do they
this.
do it? They
we
use
saw
black
this, and this
faces
is
to do it.
It's a basic principle. It's a basic Marxist principle.
Yes,
where the socioeconomic bourgeois versus I'm drawing a blank here. The bourgeois class and the proletariat class, and the strife between them. The problem is in a Western American economic system, there is no haves and have-nots because anybody can, through their own hard work, through tenacity and perseverance and dedication, they can escape. The patriarchy issue comes largely from the European system where there were dynastic patriarchal families that controlled the wealth and the means of producing that wealth.
So how does the left manage to do this? They hide the rungs on the ladder to
Well, what
success.
they do is they realize that dividing a population is very effective. Marx did it with the haves and the have-nots, so it's taking the exact same principle and saying, okay, well, rather than doing it with the haves and the have-nots, and certainly Bernie and AOC and the rest of them have tried that with the 1% versus the 99%. But when you start to divide and conquer, now it's black versus white, it's white versus every other race, it's gay versus straight versus transgender. Now we got the gays and the lesbians and the bisexuals now that are at odds with the trannies. It's like it's division, and this is why people called Obama the Great Divider, because he found the way to drive the wedge in between white Christian men and every other socioeconomic, sexual demographic that you possibly could.
But I'm going to challenge you on that.
And well, I want to bring this because we got to do a commercial break, and I want to bring this together because we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're talking about the tools that people use to draw impressionable, marginalized, disenfranchised people in.
Yep.
And the people like Nick Fuentes and the people like the rest of these influencers that you talk about, these are the people that are learning how to do that with the marginalized, disenfranchised, alienated, I don't have a purpose in my life. Hey, listen, you know what? Come on over here because the Nazi Party is going to give you a place. The White Socialist Party is going to give you a place. The Democrat Socialists of America are going to give you a place.
Yeah.
You have all of these special interest groups that are using now the same influencer tactics to try to appeal and to give purpose and thus a dopamine hit to people who don't have any other means of getting their dopamine hits.
But here's the issue. The issue is, like I said, the vast majority of the people doing this to young white men are liberal white men and liberal white women. The problem is we've been so conditioned to fight this race war by the left, taking a victim narrative. We've talked about victimhood on the left. We have victimhood here on the right. We're so set on the mainstream media not using our narrative and not doing things the way we want to. I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, Elon said we're the media now. Are we the media or not?
I got to cut you off here because we got 20 seconds before the commercial break here. So we're going to put that conversation on hold. We're going to take a very, very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by Tom Murray and also Daniel Richards. We're going to be talking about a very interesting topic, actually. Constitutionally based tax abatements here in New Hampshire. Say it isn't so. We're going to get the skinny from Tom and Dan when Granite State Live continues. Much more coming up. Don't go away.
New Hampshire Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte has been making a lot of noise about how she's funding education. The Republican budget she just signed provides more money for education than ever before. She even bragged the other day that New Hampshire is top 10 in the country when it comes to funding our children's education, as if giving money to school systems has anything to do with learning. If you look at the math, and if you got schooled in New Hampshire, the odds are good it's not your best subject. It's the exact opposite. The more money we throw at schools, the less kids learn. We're committed to wasting money on an experiment that failed, unless wasting money to drive parents to homeschool their kids was the goal. We prefer to pick on Democrats, lower hanging fruit and all that, but our rhetorical woodshed doesn't discriminate. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Unleashing your humble alpha is the key factor to unlocking profound leadership, unshakable confidence, clarity of purpose, and the quality of life you dream of. As combat veterans and military leaders Stephen Kuhn and Lane Ballone decode how you can master your life, conquer everything that stands in your way, improve your ability to cope with stress, and run toward greatness. You can find Unleash Your Humble Alpha on Amazon.
This could be the moment we've been waiting for, the chance to feel alive. And I raise my hands to the sky. What a feeling, time to feel it. This is where it all begins. This is where it all begins.
Yeah, I know. Wait, I don't know.
Yeah, you just look at that. It's so sad.
Welcome back to Granite State Live on this Tuesday evening, the 28th day of October 2025. Just a quick personal note here, some thoughts and prayers. People always say that, and I hate that term, but what else can we possibly say? Jamaica today getting slammed by Hurricane Melissa, Category 5 storm. Have a very good friend who fortunately is up here right now, but his girlfriend is in Montego Bay. So they took a direct hit down there. And I'm glad to know that at least Daniel was out of Jamaica, but they were saying at that point that there is no infrastructure in Jamaica that could sustain or could survive a direct Category 5 hit. So it's not a question of, at that point, really even survival. It's a question of how quickly can we rebuild? How quickly can the island of Jamaica recover from that? So,
Bumbaclot!
It just, what?
I got a chance to say it on air. I am happy.
Okay, well, we're talking about something serious here, so I'm
No, you're right. Bumbaclot, it means, this sucks. Bullshit.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of it's an amazing thought that, a week ago you're not even thinking about it, and then you can have something like that barrel down on you. It's kind of amazing when you think about the wrath of Mother Nature. So
I've been watching the aftermath, and it is horrible.
I have not
Everything
seen,
has been destroyed.
I have not seen any footage at all. I don't know if during a break, if Juan can pull up, I don't know if there's any live cameras or not of what the aftermath looks like. But again, just thoughts and prayers going out to people who are down there. So, all right, we're gonna shift the conversation here to taxes. And taxes, death and taxes. Nobody ever wants to talk about taxes. Unless there's the possibility that you may actually be able to file for an abatement on taxes. And this is something that we've been talking about behind the scenes. Tom Murray of the Government Integrity Project, welcome and great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And I think we've got Daniel Richard, who is, there he is. He is on the video camera. Daniel, how the hell are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. We just got to get your volume turned up there a little bit. Good to see you. And so this is something that, again, that has come up with Tom and I a couple of times. Tax abatement. Now, I think people will agree their taxes are, just like the guy in New York said, the rent's too damn high. Well, so are the property taxes here in New Hampshire. But the bigger issue is that the overwhelming majority of those dollars that you are paying in property taxes are not going to support local services. They're being sucked into a never-ending financial black hole that is public education.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that black hole is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, and that is educating our children. Another topic for another day. One of the things that was really, I've been into the education game for a little bit. I former member, co-founder of the Wyndham Academy Charter School. I served on my local Windham School Board. I was the vice chairman for 3 years. So I'm not a spring chicken around school policy. Actually worked a little bit with Andrew Valinsky on the Dover cap, because Wyndham was one of those towns that was involved in that lawsuit. Mm-hmm. So this basically circumvents around the Claremont decisions and the usurpation that happened to pretty much all of New Hampshire's residents' rights, inhabitants' rights. And that was that they took a simple word, cherish, and they turned that into taxation. So our taxing clause in Part 2, Article 5, only allows the legislature to tax for certain purposes, and that's tax our estates, property tax. And those purposes for defense, government, and the preservation of the inhabitants thereof. One of the things that's not listed is education. And that's because our framers never intended to have the state or have state-run schools. It's not communist China. We're not Russia. Everything was supposed to be local control. So how did they do that? So in Part 1, the Bill of Rights, Article 6, they put in there and what you're seeing on the screen is the actually original version on the left and the amended version in 1968. So the original version was to teach morality and piety. So if you were going to learn your ABCs, you were going to know that God loved you. And that's just the way things were in 1784. Most schools, all schools, were religious schools or had some sort of religious connotation behind it. But the part that's bolded out was the empowering clause of the legislature. They fully empowered the legislature to authorize from time to time the several towns, the parishes, the bodies corporate, and the religious societies to do what? They empowered them to authorize to do what? To make adequate provision at their own expense. And that was done through town warrant. And in 1789, we go ahead and codify that as one of the first education laws on our books. So we do that for about 186 years. Then what happens is we have the Democrat governor, John King. He decides that he wants to make an amendment to remove all the sectarian language. And this is what you get. You get the change which removes the language, which is the empowering clause. And if you can pull up that
I'm reading.
version.
I'm just reading this here. The opening line from the original document: as morality and piety, rightly grounded on evangelical principles, will give the best and greatest security to government. That is a really, really nice way of saying that if we base our government on religious evangelical principles, that in and of itself will provide a significant degree of integrity to that government.
Right.
But of course, we can't have evangelical language. So now it gets changed to as morality and piety rightly grounded on high principles.
Right.
Well, evangelical principles are based upon the Bible. They're based upon Judeo-Christian principles. So when we now strip that out and talk about rightly grounded on high principles, the first question that I would have, Tom, is, well, who is the arbiter of what is and what is not a high principle?
That's a great question. But I would like to bring back the importance of not just the removal of the sectarian language. I think that's important. But I think what's more important is the fact that in doing that very thing, they went ahead and made two fatal mistakes. They removed the empowering clause of the legislature itself to levy tax, to authorize the town to levy tax. The state never had it. Let's be clear. The state still doesn't have it. The only reason why the state is administering a swept tax is because of Claremont and its usurpation.
And when you say, just for point of clarification, when you say a sweat tax,
statewide education property tax.
Okay.
So in 1993, the Brock Court, C.J. Brock, the gentleman that was impeached, I think he's only one of two justices ever to be impeached in the state.
Yep.
That court went ahead and created out of thin air a duty to tax, which never existed. It's never been consented by the people in the state to this day. And so since then, we've had all kinds of litigation that's gone on, Londonderry, Convale, Rand, and they're all trying to interpretate judicial usurpation. So it's kind of like similar to what happened with Roe v. Wade. And then they finally overturned it in Dobbs-Jackson because they realized there was all kinds of litigation that was going on, and it was never constitutional in the first place. Claremont's not constitutional as well. And it's ripe, in my opinion, right now using the Ford test, that's the four-factor stare decisis test, to challenge any type of judicial usurpation and overturn it. And I feel as though it's right. After the Convale case that just came back down this summer, I think it was July, and basically saying that open your wallet, you're going to pay even more tax. And this is all based on fictitious judicial creation, invention, judicial fiat. It's never been consented by the people.
So you've got an entire presentation here on this. I'd like to go through as quickly as we can in basically 18 minutes what you're...
Yeah, so Daniel, I'll let you jump in. I'm sure you have a couple things that you'd like to say. I'm not going to do the whole PowerPoint, but Daniel and I have been going around the state, and we're basically making people aware of what's going to come. So basically, to sum things up, it's a judicial usurpation. You do not have to pay the tax. So we have found a mechanism to go ahead and challenge that, and that is using RSA 7616, which is an abatement process. Abatement process does two things. The courts like to do a couple things. They like to say, well, you didn't state a claim for which relief can be granted. Well, clearly, the relief that can be granted is the actual concrete injury, Baker v. Carr, which is the tax bill. Okay. The other thing they like to say is they say, you didn't state a claim for which relief can be granted. They also like to say you don't have standing. But clearly, as a taxpayer, you clearly have standing. So you meet those two definitions. So what you get to do is you get to go in front of the assessor. You challenge it. It gets denied. You go and appeal to the selectmen. It gets denied. That puts you in front of a Superior Court judge. And this is where you get a chance to use RSA 491.22, which is you seek declaratory judgment. You lay down the constitutional question. So now the judiciary, this is the first time, by the way, that a stare decisis challenge has ever been made on Claremont. This is the first time. And so this is where the constitutional question gets laid. You put forward the four-factor test, why it's unconstitutional, why it's a usurpation. And then at that point, whether the New Hampshire Supreme Court denies it or not, also you have the avenues of in the federal claims, where, due process, takings clause, that you can actually appeal this to SCOTUS if they grant cert. So, Dan, you want to jump in?
Couple things that come to mind is the very first thing that struck me in the Claremont decision was the fact that the judge ignored two critical elements in the case. First, he ignored examining Article 6 that Tom referred to in 1784. And I want to touch on that briefly and expound upon what Tom didn't talk about that may better explain to the audience what was going on. For those who are amateur historians, they would all understand what the Protestant Reformation was about, right? The whole Catholic world was tipped on its head when a man named Martin Luther wrote a Bible in German, and it led to the revolt against the Catholic Church. And the next important event is the King of England would ultimately utilized the Protestant Reformation to justify the creation of the Anglican Church. Now, why would I talk about religion? Because it's paramount to understanding Article 6 in 1784. And the next thing that would happen is that when they would write this document in 1784, they would address their freedom of religion, because when one of the things not taught in school is the fact that we were here for 150 years. The colonies were in existence for 150 years, from Plymouth Rock in 1620 to the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So the abusive practices that they accused the Catholic Church of doing, the King of England adopted those very same abusive practices towards the citizens, or to his citizens, those all the colonists here in the new land. And this is where the taxation began. And so this all gets put in place to prohibit that very practice. So we end up with this Article 6, and the trial judge, see, Article 83, the judge in the Claremont decision used the word cherish. He somehow created, after 200 years, that the founding fathers didn't get it right, the judges didn't get it right, and the citizens didn't get it right for 200 years. This judge named Brock says, all of you people are stupid. None of you know your history. None of you can interpret the law like me. And I'm going to give you this BS ruling. And that's how we got it, totally in opposition of what it was all about. Again, it was spelled out in great detail. The second part is he cites the book that says it all, that verifies everything I just said to your audience, which is The History of Education, 1833. 50 years after the Declaration of Independence, 50 years after the laws of New Hampshire under its new constitution would go into effect, we would discover something very, very important to today's conversation: morality and the understanding of morality and religion in a society. They understood, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin, or John, it was one of the founders, Madison maybe, that said that this form of government was for a moral and righteous people. If you remove the morality and the teaching of a deity from if all of us, for example, there's 5 of us on this call right now, on this podcast, if all 5 of us are Bible-believing Christians and we're all Baptist per se, right? Well, what happens if someone of another faith wants to move into the neighborhood and has now declared to be our sworn enemy and has declared that they want us dead? Well, how are we going to peacefully coexist? What moral compass is going to now spearhead this debate? Well, this would ultimately drive the debate for more than 100 years here in New Hampshire, and we would ultimately get to a point where all the denominations that would come and go, or come and stay, I should say, would ultimately lead to the government changing schools from its original intent to teach religion and now teach no religion at all under the pretense of separation of church and state. And that's really my contribution to the background of how we got here, right? And so the important part of all of this is, Tom and I fully agree, is this. If the whole purpose of school is to teach morality, what were the first schools? Did you guys realize that Massachusetts had mandatory taxing? You had to pay your taxes in Massachusetts. It wasn't an option. Excuse me, voting, not taxes, voting. Of course you had to pay your tax. Forgive me for that blunder. Did you guys ever hear that voting in Massachusetts for years was mandatory? No. Yeah, well, the reason is they understood you're getting screwed by the government anyway, so you might as well participate in the process because we're going to force whatever the rest of these people decide. So we're going to force you to participate. That way we secure your consent to the form of government we're going to force upon you. But I digress. So the whole point of this is that all of this is directly tied together. And so the education piece was all based on teaching reading, right? Why were they here? Why did they settle the new land? To spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the first thing you had to do under the Protestant Reformation is know how to read the Bible for yourself. And that was spearheaded. That's what public schools, in the other addition to Article 6, charter schools. What was the first school in New Hampshire? You guys know?
Was it Dartmouth?
Dartmouth. It was Dartmouth. You know why it was Dartmouth? Because they appealed to the king, and the king granted them a charter.
A royal charter.
So that's exactly right. And so when the state legislature was created by our state constitution, then and today, it is the body responsible for granting corporate charters. And now today, because of statutory construction, the legislature has granted the Secretary of State to have a corporate division. But before that responsibility was passed on to the Secretary of State's corporate division, the legislature has always been responsible for the creation and issuance of corporate charters. Here's another trivia question for you. What was the consequence of the Boston Tea Party in 1773? They lost their charter. The King of England did what? Massachusetts Bay Colony was a commercial franchise and they got permission to do business from the King of England through their charter. So this is why when Tom alludes to that the legislature is empowered, it was specifically empowered to give towns, parishes, bodies corporate, and religious societies, those four entities, the ability to be in business, to apply to the legislature, to be in the business of teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ.
And Dan, if I could...
So if you remove that, if you dismantle that, there's no more mandate for why there's any involvement.
Right.
And then, of course, the 1819 Toleration Act, which severed all of that, which completely did away with any mandatory taxation whatsoever. And it clearly put between Madison's Memorial and Remonstrance and New Hampshire's 1819 Toleration Act, it put a complete end. So today we have no provision for taxation for the school system being forced upon you today. None, zero.
So I want to make just a clarification here. So we're not talking about absolving a person of tax liability for the support of critical infrastructure and services in their respective towns. We're talking specifically about the 60+% of your tax dollars that are going directly.
Let me clarify that.
Into the school systems, I think most people are tired of funding.
This two taxation when you get a tax bill. Here's the statewide education property tax. What I would submit to you is a state tax that DRA unlawfully collects upon its taxpayers. And the reason why it's unlawful is because the state does not possess taxing authority for the purposes of education, period. You're not going to find a constitutional basis that exists. The only reason they do it is through judicial fiat with the whole Claremont and its progeny.
So let me ask you, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. So if suddenly now this took off and you have large swaths of the population, taxpayers, that are filing abatements. Okay, you are going to see the public education system collapsing.
The legislature needs to get ahead of this.
I'm not saying I'm opposed to this.
No,
I mean, because as far as I'm concerned, let the public education system become competitive. I've always advocated for school choice. I've always advocated for voucher systems. I've always advocated for parents to pull their kids out of their local school and be able to send them where they want to go, because obviously competition is a good thing. The educational system, the schools that are performing well, they get the payment in the form of the vouchers. And then you have the underperforming schools that are like, hey, listen, you know what? Just like any other business, if you perform poorly, if you don't meet expectations, if you suck, you're out of business.
And that's the practical point. The constitutional point and the taxing point is we have been in a constitutional crisis for 31 years, since Claremont. And I don't think people realize that. It's actually further than that, though. It's 1968. When this amendment is passed by 75% of the people, the consent to remove that language, it creates a constitutional vacuum where now there is no body politic that exists today that has taxing authority to tax you. The state never had it. The only way they got it is through usurpation. Mm-hmm. The towns had it. But they removed the empowerment clause to authorize the towns in 68, and they lost it. And I don't know if that was in the intent to do that, but that's the plain text. And that's what we go by. That is prima facie lawful.
So going,
Keith, I'd like to hold on, Keith. I'd like to also answer your question, which is, why would the public school system as we know it today collapse if this all gets steam and we get to a legal ruling or a legal understanding that this isn't going to go on anymore? That could be the ultimate outcome, because you have to ask yourself, are we financing our own destruction? So you have to ask yourself, if the whole purpose of the public benefit, and I ask all our viewers here, what is the public benefit of school? What are we as taxpayers supposed to benefit from, right? Well, in 1784, they told us morality and piety, rightly grounded on evangelical principles, means that you'll live in a much safer, united community. That was the public benefit of allowing people to go into business to teach some form of religion. Because remember, in 1784, Jesus Christ has been dead for 1784 years, right? The calendar begins from as we know it. So it's not like they didn't understand. What they understood was morality was critical, but that the state couldn't make those decisions. That's why right of conscience is so critical to this entire conversation. So what do we, so as we look to, if we break the system by pointing out that it shouldn't be taxed and we shouldn't be involved, I argue the government can't balance a checkbook. I don't want it anywhere near my children. Thank you very much. End of story, period. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So if that's the case, so make an argument for me, someone who wants to say why we should keep the status quo alive. It's absurd. What, for DEI and cutting off boys' penises and girls' breasts? I mean, these people have lost their mind. And I would go one step further. Isn't this the very thing the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution was written to prohibit? Has the government, or has it not, created its own form of religion? Because the First Amendment, amongst its many of its 5 provisions, says what? The Establishment Clause, that no government shall establish a form of religion. But in order for all of these government schools to exist, they have to do what? Some moral code. Someone's made decisions about what's right, wrong, or indifferent. And I can tell you it's not the Bible, it's government or progressive socialist communist people. And that's why we're financing our own destruction.
So in effect, the issue of separation of church and state was never in danger, as they presupposed when they changed the language, the sectarian language in the Constitution in the first place, because it wasn't the government instituting any sort of religion. It was private organizations taking it upon themselves to teach religion, morality, and piety. And to that point, Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli actually goes further into this, saying we are not a Christian nation, but it says we are not a Christian nation for the purposes of separating the United States from culpability in engaging in a treaty and speaking for all other Christian nations that engaged in warfare throughout the Crusades.
Unfortunately, guys, we are getting the music here, so we're coming up at top of the hour. Definitely want to have a further conversation about this because there's not enough time in a 30-minute segment to be able to really start to dissect this. I want this to serve as kind of the appetizer for a much larger conversation. Daniel Richard from New Hampshire Committee of Safety and Tom Murray, Government Integrity Project, gipamerica.org is the website. Again, gipamerica.org. Is there information on this already on the website, or is this forthcoming?
Not yet. Nope, forthcoming.
Right. And something I would absolutely expect to see here is a moderated discussion going on the road with Daniel, you, maybe myself, a couple of other people, moderate this discussion and push this conversation out to the masses. I want to thank both of you guys for jumping on. Much more of Granite State Live coming up right after this. Don't go away.
New Hampshire Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte has been making a lot of noise about how she's funding education. The Republican budget she just signed provides more money for education than ever before. She even bragged the other day that New Hampshire is top 10 in the country when it comes to funding our children's education, as if giving money to school systems has anything to do with learning. If you look at the math, and if you got schooled in New Hampshire, the odds are good it's not your best subject. It's the exact opposite. The more money we throw at schools, the less kids learn. We're committed to wasting money on an experiment that failed, unless wasting money to drive parents to homeschool their kids was the goal. We prefer to pick on Democrats, lower hanging fruit and all that, but our rhetorical woodshed doesn't discriminate. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
This could be the moment we've been waiting for, the chance to feel alive. And I raise my hands to the sky. What a feeling, time to feel it. This is where it all begins. This is where it all begins.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
defense denied any responsibility. Tote's wife, Megan, their 3 kids, and the family dog were all found dead in their Celebration home in 2020. During his trial, Tote testified that his wife killed the kids and then herself, even though deputies have a videotaped confession from him. The jurors didn't buy Tote's story and convicted him after about 7 hours of deliberations.
All right. Welcome back to Granite State Live on this Tuesday evening, the 28th day of October 2025. That is a story of Anthony Tote and his family, or the family that more appropriately he murdered. His 42-year-old wife, Megan, and their children, 13-year-old Alexander, 11-year-old Tyler, and 4-year-old Zoe. And that's a homicide that occurred in December of 2019. If you are a true crime fan, and specifically there's a podcast out there called Crime Junkie, and that was the Tote family. I actually remember. Truth be told, I actually I listen to true crime podcasts when I'm driving down. The only time I ever listen to it, by the way, is when I'm driving to and coming from the studio, heading home. And so I remember this. This case. It was a full hour-long presentation on the Tote family murders. And joining us tonight is Nils Gravilius, a Los Angeles-based private detective who conducts investigations without regard to local or national borders, and conducting kidnapping, robbery, homicide, assault, hijacking, extortion, workplace theft, mass tort, conflict of interest investigations. He's got a pretty diverse background. Nils, great to have you on the program. Welcome back.
Rain jacket to the...
Well, good evening, gentlemen.
Sorry about that that unexpected soundbite there. One's evidently having a seizure behind the soundboard. Anyway, continue, sir. I'm sorry.
I don't know anything about this case. I didn't do my homework, and I apologize to you, gentlemen. I was looking at another case where a guy came to with his child and his wife's remains in bed with him. And when the sheriffs came in the other night, he said that they were still alive. And they'd obviously, 2 of the children were mummified in their beds. And you have me completely confused as to there's been too many bizarre family murders apparently, and I apologize to you, gentlemen. I didn't do any
That's okay. I
homework
mean, the show notes were about the Totes, but listen. I mean, we can change. We can talk about anything. We can talk about cooking tips, men's fashions, or another murder case if you want to do that. Let's stick with the murder case. That always sounds interesting.
Well, I'm seeing more and more of these very strange murder cases. People who weren't bizarre 2 years ago are suddenly bizarre. And we've discussed a couple of times psychosis, and aggression, that sort of thing, possibly cannabis psychosis. I don't want anybody to think that I am Girolamo Savonarola when it comes to cannabis. I mean, some guys obviously can use cannabis with impunity without having problems, and others clearly cannot. We discussed the 2 Marines, former Marines, a couple of weeks ago. The one in North Carolina who shot from ship to shore into the restaurant and murdered several people. He had a recent diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, and the fellow up in Michigan who invaded the Mormon church and lit it on fire. Both of these men were able to function as military members serving overseas, make it all the way through boot camp, infantry training regiment, all of that, and go afield successfully without getting fragged by their buddies or landing in the stockade or something like that. But suddenly at age 40, they are irrationally aggressive and that sort of thing. I'm seeing more and more of it. Yesterday, there was a man whom the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department tried to contact on a domestic violence case, and he murdered the deputy and then led deputies on a high-speed pursuit on one of our freeways, the 210 freeway, and it shut down the whole freeway when his motorcycle went into another vehicle because an off-duty deputy managed to steer him into that. I'm seeing a lot of criminality from men who weren't career criminals. Am I missing something?
Well, I'm actually curious about this. When you say that you're seeing a lot of changes here, the people that are perpetrating these, have they had previous run-ins? And as a private investigator, you understand the value of open source intelligence. So if you are looking at a case and you are looking at the background of a person there, how deeply are you diving into that person's background and previous encounters with the law or restraining orders? And I'll explain why I'm getting to that point here in a second. But what are you typically looking at?
I'm looking for moral turpitude and irrational aggression. Moral turpitude in the sense, do they have a conscience? Or is their conscience flexible once they take on alcohol or drugs, that sort of thing? Some men use alcohol to smother their conscience temporarily or permanently. Who knows, right? And then the other thing in a background, there are some men who will justify, and women who will justify violence in the home who would never be violent outside their own home. There have been shocking abuses within the home where a guy will go to work and be respectable in all other ways, but without compunction, he'll knock his wife around or his children around. But moral turpitude is typically what I'm looking for. I'll give you a good example, too. There is a serial killer who is justifiably famous or infamous named Dennis Rader, who is better known by his moniker BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. Wichita, Kansas, I believe. And he marauded through the 70s and then had a silent period for about 12, 15 years and then went active again, and then ultimately was identified by DNA triangulation. Had detectives in that jurisdiction gotten really busy and combed through domestic violence restraining orders issued by the court, they would have found well prior, 10 years prior to the ultimate identification and apprehension of Rader, 2 separate restraining orders taken out against Rader by women who were not involved with Rader. They sought the protection of the courts because Rader was so inappropriately aggressive toward them without a relationship of any kind. And his role in that community was code enforcement officer. Can you imagine what a Karen this Rader character was? That 2 citizens felt a need to take out a restraining order against him for irrational aggression, and nobody ever combed through to look for anything like that.
One of the things that, and I had mentioned this, I think previously about this, when we look at the data sets and we look at the numbers that have been compiled by the Department of Justice, the National Institute for Justice, and the FBI, and we look at mass killers, mass shooters especially, there is and of course, correlation not necessarily equaling causation. We get this. But there is a disproportionate number of perpetrators that have had a history with selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So we're talking, the mood stabilizers and antidepressants and this litany of drugs that oftentimes are prescribed to adolescent and pediatric patients. And they're not actually FDA approved for distribution to adolescents or pediatric patients, but yet they are given to kids. They're given to kids in record numbers. I can tell you, as the former director of a juvenile detention facility, when we would have kids that were either transferred into or transferred out of our custody, oftentimes those children were accompanied with a literal brown shopping bag filled with drugs that they were morning, afternoon, or lunchtime, and after dinner, and then bedtime med calls. These kids were they were consuming pharmaceuticals the way that a normal person would consume Pez or M&Ms. And we're talking about, we talk about the THC psychosis. The effect that has, if it's a neurotransmitter disruption, that can create very violent psychotic states. If you have somebody who is on an NSSRI and goes off of it, oftentimes when you look at it, many of these people are medication non-compliant. Whether it's the SSRI that is creating the issue, or, and I suspect it's not necessarily the SSRI that's causing it, it's what happens now when the neurotransmitter disruption occurs as a result of becoming medication non-compliant. That's where the psychotic break occurs. So I think that's one of the things that we have to look at. But in a recent study, and there's been some studies on this, and I was just attending a conference in San Antonio, and one of the FBI profilers was talking about this. And he said that of 250 people that they had just randomly selected and started to look at in terms of trying to find commonalities. And this is something that when we start looking at, and I do behavioral threat assessments, and this is something that I never thought, I have to be honest, to look at until I got this data and I got this information. And now it's actually startling, is the instances of domestic violence involving strangulation. When you have a person who is, and there was a recent study in California, they looked at law enforcement officers that were killed in intentional homicides and 33 out of 44 law enforcement officers that were killed in intentional homicides were killed by men that had a history of domestic violence. And of those, 80% had a history of strangulation. That they had put their hands around a domestic partner's neck, not strangulation that resulted in a homicide, but strangling a person. And so whether there was an arrest for domestic violence involving strangulation, or there was a civil restraining order that was petitioned for that listed strangulation as one of the mitigating factors in that case. Strangulation has become a major red flag when we're looking at the potentiality of a person's violence down the road. And I'm just curious if you had ever picked up on that, because I never did until I started to look more and more and more at this. And I said, there's something here. There's something about this. Again, it's not that every single person that has ever strangled a spouse is going to become the next mass killer, but it's a major, major indicator as a pre-attack indicator that this person is capable of committing a domestic homicide or another case. And when we look at a lot of the mass shooters that were out there, I'm not going to name their names, but there have been a number of highly prominent mass shootings that have taken place, and a little bit of a dive into the background of the perpetrators discloses that they had a history of strangulation with other people, whether they were parents, whether they were intimate partners. Strangulation exists.
Well, okay, so let's look at the kinetic aspects of a fight, gentlemen. Let's say I'm in a fight with somebody within my household, presuming somebody that I live with, that is my romantic partner, and I'm aggressive toward that person. I'm angry enough to inflict violence. Don't I also want to silence them, to stop their criticism, to make it so that they cannot summon help? Well, what's the quickest route to doing that? Either manual strangulation, ligature strangulation almost always leads to homicide.
Correct.
Because
yes.
Once you constrict somebody with a ligature, you can't undo the damage that is done, typically to the hyoid bone, cutting off oxygen flow to the brain, all of those things. But it's the quickest way to silence someone. And I think you're onto something here, because it indicates a level of aggression and a willingness to cross a certain Rubicon of violence, wherein no matter what else, you're going to meet your emotional need. And the emotional need of the aggressor is silence, compliance, and overwhelming the victim, whether it leads to immediate homicide or a homicide 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 months later, whatever. So I think this is an interesting study, and I had not heard of this before. But if I were studying a subject and discovered that he had a history of strangling even one person, whether that led to death or not, I would know that man was capable of future violence. Remember, you ran a juvenile detention center, so in Department of Corrections, the criteria that they use for evaluating whether or not a detainee, a confinee, a convict, an inmate, a patient, etc., is capable of violence is past use of violence.
Mm-hmm. You talk about there's a case actually just came up. I forgot the gentleman's. I'm not going to call him a gentleman, but the individual's appeal just came up. Naples, Florida, in Collier County. Individual with the last name of Dumas. Dumas was a Haitian, lived in Naples, and ultimately there was an ongoing history of domestic violence in that household, and Dumas actually wound up cutting the throat of both his wife and also his 5 children. He just appealed his unsuccessfully tried to appeal his death sentence in the state of Florida. And actually, when you look at Dumas' criminal history, he has a history of strangulation. And so when you talk about it, yes, I mean the symbolism of trying to silence. But in talking with behavioral threat analysis or behavioral threat analysts on a federal level, they refer to this as a loaded God complex, where if you think about it, now you have a person, and of course domestic violence is always predicated on the power that the attacker has and taking power away, disempowering the victim. And so when you're talking about a person who is now putting their hands around another person's throat, and the symbolism that is there, if I want you dead, all I have to do is squeeze. If I want to let you live, all I have to do is release the pressure. There is so much power and so much control that is being demonstrated and exhibited by a person who would put their hands around an intimate partner's neck. And
it's also moral turpitude. You're crossing a line of morality in so doing.
And again, correlation not necessarily equaling causation, but during COVID, with people now being housebound, the amount, and this is something else that was discussed, that the amount of pornography that is being viewed and consumed at home, especially by younger people. I mean, people who are under the ages of 18. Remember, anybody who's 16-year-old with a hot internet connection can get on and go on any of these free porn sites. So the amount of pornography that was being consumed, you want to talk about moral turpitude, skyrocketed, especially during COVID. And out of all of the different categories of pornography, what was one category that represented the most or greatly consumed out of all pornography? Take a guess.
Let me guess. Choking
videos. Yep. Where whether it's acted out or whether it's actually happening, people in the throes of sex are choking out their intimate partners. And the amount of choking and strangulation videos that were being consumed, that were being watched, especially during COVID, was one of it represented the greatest amount of porn consumption or viewing. So that's a very, very concerning statistic, especially when this is a commonality. And again, correlation not necessarily equaling causation. But I mean, here's the thing. Even if somebody wants to take offense to that, you strangle an intimate partner, you know what? If you have the capability and the propensity to do that, I think that should serve as a red flag, period. And if anybody out there has been in a relationship with a person that has put their hands around your neck or your throat, then you owe it to yourself to create distance between that person and get a restraining order.
Well, I would agree with you completely. It's a line of moral turpitude, and one of the 4 horsemen of the Gen Z millennial apocalypse appears to be searchable internet porn anyway. Whether it's choking porn or anything else, pornography is now software. Software controls what hardware does, and so people are looking to change what they think, how they feel, through the use of pornography. And it's not just males anymore. More and more females also consume pornography.
When we look at cases where these murder-suicides are taking place, whether it's the Tote case or the case that you're talking about, when we look at a family member who kills their husband or wife, and we just had a domestic violence homicide situation here in New Hampshire where kids were killed, and of course everybody's like, oh, it's the husband that did it. Well, lo and behold, it was not the husband that did it. It was the wife. And the wife was actually facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement at her company. So she kills her husband and then kills all but the youngest child that was in the house. When you look at cases where intimate partners are killing their spouses and also killing their children, and maybe it's not a murder-suicide, maybe it's just a domestic violence homicide and they stay alive, is there, and they don't kill themselves, is there a commonality that you've been able to find as either a precipitating factor or a factor that comes into play more and more and more often when you're looking at these cases?
Well, it's very similar to the mass shooting. It's the metastatic self-pity married to a unique sense of personal grievance. Only in this case, the personal grievance arises of their relationship with their spouse. Occasionally, you'll get the Asian dynamic, and I'm not trying to speak jingoistically here. You see a lot of complete family killing in Asia, Korea, China, Vietnam, Japan, where when there's a failure, the entire family fails. And the patriarch or matriarch will kill everybody in the family just because they have failed. And they don't want the rest of the family to experience family-level failure and shame.
Mm-hmm.
But in the West, it always seems to arise of metastatic self-pity, unique sense of personal grievance, and a tendency toward irrational violence.
It's an interesting thing too, and one of the connections that's being made here is childhood trauma. And I'm not one, or I haven't been one historically, to look at it and say, okay, poor me, poor me, poor me. But especially in a domestic violence case where there are children, I think it is irrefutable that if a child is watching domestic violence, boys learn through normalization that hitting is okay. And girls learn through normalization that in a relationship, they get hit. And especially from the male perspective, and again, of course, there are many instances where the female is the aggressor and the male is the victim. Largely that goes unreported because of I think the stigma that would go along with being a man and having your wife beating you up. But it does happen, and I've personally seen it in law enforcement.
Most men who are convicted of domestic violence are not one-way domestic abusers. In most cases, it is they were hit and responded.
I don't have any information to that effect, but it's interesting when you start to look at the number of people who have become domestic violence perpetrators. When you start to look at cases of childhood trauma, what is the likelihood that that person is going to grow up to become an offender as a male because they saw this, normalized this, and think that this is how you treat an intimate partner? And especially for women, are they more permissive because watching their mother get beat on a regular basis, this became a normalized behavior?
Well, let's add another layer to it. What if it's not just normal? What if it's expected? What if you are punished if you don't up the aggression yourself in your own conflicts as a child? And your mother or your father punishes you for failure to react violently to other children or things within the household or without the household. And then you get into the random reward aspect that turns a person who is aggressive from someone who is just aggressive into somebody who's aggressive without a conscience.
That's a danger. That's a recipe for absolute disaster.
I think you're right.
I think I think definitely that the strangulation aspect of that is something that, and I have spent a lot of time since having come back, since I've had that information. It's been something that I've actually gone back and looked at a number of behavioral threat cases that I had worked, and trying to find those connections. And I'm finding the connections. And so it's something that is absolutely concerning. But I think especially now, we were talking earlier on the show, Julian and I, about how people are behaving in such a way. They're so tightly wound. An attorney that I do a lot of expert work with, witness work with, was just relaying two instances where people in their late 40s, early 50s were now facing criminal charges in gun cases where they had never committed a crime before, but now one in a road rage incident, another one in his Chinese food hadn't been brought up to the front counter for him to take out quickly enough, and so he pulls a gun on the cashier in this Chinese restaurant. What is it that is causing these types? I mean, we've talked about the connection with the SSRIs. We've talked about the connection with high potency THC edibles, certainly. But I mean, just in terms of our general society, is there something that we can point a finger at and say, this is likely to be the case? What is causing people to become so high strung and tightly wound that they would snap, or that they would consider physically harming a family member, or physically harming their children, or murdering their children?
Well, what you're describing to me is something akin to convict culture. Let's say the three of us are sitting around a round table in a prison, say Walpole, and we each have the same amount of food on our trays, and it's the same food. And Julian decides that he's going to reach over onto my tray and take the other half of my PBJ from my tray. If I don't immediately react to take it back and discipline Julian, even if Julian is a mate of mine, a friend of mine, other inmates are going to look at me as prey rather than predator. And I will be considered a punk because I haven't reacted angrily and violently enough to Julian. Well, this sort of aggression is rewarded now in social media and in the social milieu of the electronic variety. If somebody disrespects me, if I'm not immediately lashing out at that person to tell them what I'm going to do with them, if they disrespect me again, then others are going to look at me and say, gosh, Nils, you sure are a punk these days. Do you mind if I come over and take your car for 2 weeks? That kind of thing. Social media has become laden with reward for irrational aggression and an expectation that we must react to everything immediately.
Mm-hmm. There is something called the ACEs test. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's the Adverse Child Experience Questionnaire. And it asks a simple series of 10 questions. And it's actually interesting when you look at different populations. It's very, very simple 10 questions. Number one, did you feel that you didn't have enough to eat, or had to wear dirty clothes, or had no one to protect you or take care of you at home? Number two, did you lose a parent through divorce, abandonment, death, or other reasons? Number three, did you live with anybody who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide? Number four, did you live with any person who had a problem with drinking or using drugs, including prescription drugs? Number five, did your parents or adults in your home ever hit, punch, beat, or threaten to harm each other? Number six, did you live with anyone who went to jail or prison? Number seven, did a parent or adult in your home ever swear at you, insult you, or put you down? Number eight, did a parent or adult in your home ever hit, beat, kick, or physically hurt you in any way? Number nine, did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought that you were special? And number 10, did you experience unwanted sexual contact, including fondling, oral, anal, vaginal intercourse, or penetration? And, when you start to look at a lot of these offenders, you're talking about people that are scoring 7s and higher on these ACE exams. So what kids are being exposed to at home is absolutely going to have an effect. I don't think anybody would really argue that point. I think the question is, how do we address the issue now so the future generations aren't being exposed to this, normalizing this behavior, and now bringing this to their families down the road? I think it's something that absolutely needs to be explored.
I think you're correct. In some ways, that reads like the Yorkshire Lottery from 100 years ago. This was
Los Angeles-based private detective. We're going to have you back on the program again. I want to thank you so much for your time. We are flat out of it right now, but we'll get you back on soon enough. Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a lovely day.
All right. You too. All right. Much more coming up right after this. We're going to be welcoming to the program Mary Graybar, author of Debunking FDR. Going to be talking about the upcoming mayoral election in the once great city of New York. Stick around.
New Hampshire Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte has been making a lot of noise about how she's funding education. The Republican budget she just signed provides more money for education than ever before. She even bragged the other day that New Hampshire is top 10 in the country when it comes to funding our children's education, as if giving money to school systems has anything to do with learning. If you look at the math, and if you got schooled in New Hampshire, the odds are good it's not your best subject. It's the exact opposite. The more money we throw at schools, the less kids learn. We're committed to wasting money on an experiment that failed, unless wasting money to drive parents to homeschool their kids was the goal. We prefer to pick on Democrats, lower hanging fruit and all that, but our rhetorical woodshed doesn't discriminate. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
This could be the moment we've been waiting for, the chance to feel alive. And I raise my hands to the sky. What a feeling, time to feel it. This is where it all begins. This is where it all begins.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut. The one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Granite State Live on this Tuesday, the 28th day of October. I can't believe it's already October. It's crazy. Halloween coming up. I am not. Are you a Halloween person, one? No? Put your mic on. Come on. Talk to me.
I am not.
You are not. Why are you not a Halloween person?
I don't know. I don't like scary movies. Something I don't enjoy.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't. I mean, I think it really gives an opportunity for people to engage in behavior that they wouldn't normally do. My wife was driving down the street the other day, and somebody in full, the movie Scream. And this is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And somebody's walking down the middle of the road wearing a full Scream thing. And steps out in front of the car. And I'm like, that's a good way to get your ass shot. That's probably not something that you should do. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, there was this thing with people dressing up like creepy clowns and just standing outside of people's windows. Again, it's just one of those things that if you value your life and you value your teeth, it's probably not something that you should do. Because it's a good way to find yourself in a situation. Because again, it's our use of force laws are predicated upon a person's reasonable belief that they are in fear. And if you're standing there with a knife, whether it's a toy knife, whether it's a real knife, I don't care. That's a really, really good way to get yourself in trouble. Yeah. Well, another way to get yourself in trouble is to vote for people that don't quite understand the basics of economic principles. Could I possibly be talking about a wannabe socialist mayor? Yeah, you're damn right. I could be. Zoran Mamdani seeking the mayoral nod in the once great city of New York. Mary Graybar, author of Debunking FDR, The Man and the Myths, is going to join us to talk a little bit more about this. And is this the beginning or the end of the Democrat Party? I submit it's actually the third transition that we've seen the Democrat Party going through. Mary, welcome to the program. Great to have you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
So, first of all, I think at this point, and I don't want to say that anything is a foredrawn conclusion, but I mean, reading the tea leaves, he's going to wind up in the mayor's office, is he not?
Yeah, I would bet money on that. Definitely. Unfortunately, we had such a poor candidate in Cuomo. I can't believe that he didn't just go hide himself in shame for the rest of his life for what he's done to New York. But that's what we have now. And we've got a bunch of, people in New York City. It's a Democratic city overwhelmingly, but they've been indoctrinated in our colleges and they just believe democratic socialism. I don't know what difference there is between socialism and democratic socialism. Democratic socialism sounds better, but they've believed the fairy tales and what he and his fellow democratic socialists have been presenting as they're going to have low rents, free bus rides. People in white areas are going to be taxed at a higher rate, and everything's just going to be hunky dory.
So we understand this. At least the critical thinkers, excuse me, in our society do, Mary. There is no free lunch. Somebody has to pay for it. So if they think that they're going to go after the 1% and tax these people to support all of these little pork projects and all of these freebies that they're handing out, they're going to learn really quickly that they're going to lose, the very people that they're seeking to tax. You already have people ever since COVID, the high earners, the wealthy people, the business owners, the land, they are moving out of New York because they don't want their pockets robbed. And they're going to move to places like Florida, which are going to offer them tax breaks. There's not going to be a personal income tax. They have low corporate income taxes, no personal income tax. They're going to move to more fertile plains. And so ultimately, who is going to wind up paying for this? And this is the one thing that people just can't seem to understand. Well, it's just going to be the people who can afford it. No, because they're going to leave, and you're going to lose those people. Well, I don't understand what this issue is that people somehow think that this guy, and we understand. I mean, this guy was funded primarily through George Soros. We understand that. But what is it about somebody like this that people put stock in? You're selecting this guy to make decisions for one of, if not the most populated city in the country. What is this guy's experience to do anything? Balance a checkbook? It boggles my mind.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a certain charisma and a charm. He draws people to himself. And in a lot of ways, he reminds me of the young FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He comes from a family of privilege. He's never really had to have a job. He's only been, working as an elected official. Mom Donnie, I think, was helping minority homeowners with their loans or something like that, some leftist nonprofit organization that was colluding with the government. So he's never really had to go out there and determine how to make a profit, how to make payroll, how to pay bills. His parents are wealthy. His mother's a famous filmmaker. His father's a Columbia University professor. And, his head is just full of theories. He's never had to go out there in the real world and struggle like, the vast majority of Americans have. And so he's just presenting this pie in the sky plan just the way, FDR did, with just very vague statements, about, how, the working class needs to, be looked after and, expressing sympathy in emotional terms for workers and students. And so it's the same kind of wool that's being pulled over voters' eyes. And FDR's political career resulted in, in tragedy. I mean, he extended the Great Depression. It lasted longer than it needed to, and I think that part of that was deliberate. And Mamdani is, cut out of the same cloth.
What I found interesting about the Mamdani election and what I've seen so far is a lot of his support is not coming from poor people. It's coming from people who are making good money. They're accountants, they're lawyers, they're college students. These are people we're seeing it in the Jewish groups in New York. We're seeing it from the Asians in New York and from middle class suburban white women in New York. And you're seeing most of the poor Hispanic and black people in New York not actually supporting them. They were leaning towards Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams. As a matter of fact, Andrew Cuomo just got a bump as Eric Adams endorsed him to cut into Mamdani's lead. But I think the major problem here is something I've been consistent criticizing the GOP for is one, we didn't put up a better alternative. Two, we're not proposing alternatives. The New York GOP is non-existent in this race. They have basically phoned it in and allowed the defender of capitalism to be Andrew frickin' Cuomo. Against a socialist, we're allowing a lesser socialist to be the guy who's defending capitalism. Nowhere on the battlefield, the intellectual battlefield here, is somebody going, maybe we should not be choosing between French vanilla and vanilla. Maybe we should be choosing an entirely different flavor that is going to solve the problem. Or maybe we should stop eating ice cream and eat your frickin' veggies and some meat and have some sort of, I don't know, some dietary common sense.
Hell no, I want mint chocolate chip. Do these people not? I mean, and again, if you're talking about somebody who's old enough to be an attorney or a doctor or an accountant or something like that, do they not remember? And can they not compare and contrast? I mean, I don't know. Maybe because I'm just older. I mean, I remember the Ed Koch, New York. And I remember the Rudy Giuliani, New York. And I remember the Bill de Blasio, New York. Are people and Adams. So is it that these people just don't understand it? Do they not remember? Do they not understand that there is a direct connection between how you live and how you vote? Which, for the record, and then let me be the one person to say, that's why we don't want New Yorkers in New Hampshire. Stay the hell out. That's why we don't want New Jersey people in New Hampshire. Stay the hell out. And for all of you Flatlander massholes, this goes to you. Stay the hell out.
Yep,
but that being said, this is why we don't want these people there, because they will flee their own utopian hellholes. And I say that because, I mean, this is progressive utopia, right? This is what you vote for. They don't like it. So now they run up here to New Hampshire, where property is cheap and life is good. And they continue to vote for the same people who drove their respective communities into the ground. These people are too stupid to establish a cause and effect connection. What the hell is wrong with these people?
Well, I attribute a lot of our problems to the educational system because people just aren't, I was in education, I was college for 20 years. And, even way back in 2013, I'd have students coming in, with their heads full of ideas about how great socialism is. And they had absolutely no idea about the gulags, about starvation, and how miserable life was in communist countries. And I think what we have now is an electorate that has just been brainwashed, and they don't understand what's coming. And, when it starts inching up on them, then they realize that they need to leave. But then there's a certain group of people, as was mentioned, a lot of these people are well-to-do, are professionals, and have a lot of money. They're not affected. They're not taking the subways. They're not taking the buses. They're living in, there uh, own communities where they're shut off from everyone else and, riding around in limousines, and they're not affected. And that's why we have so many of these billionaires voting for Democrats. It's the working class and the middle class that, is attracted to the Republican Party, that wants the lower taxes, safety on our streets, and so forth.
Okay, so here's the bottom line, and I think we need to have a basic history lesson. The first thing we need to do is understand that communism has never been achieved, and communism never will. I don't care what the USSR. Well, it was communist Russia. No, it was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Mm-hmm. Remember that the idea of communism is nobody owns anything, and there are no laws, there are no ruling class. What that requires is the ruling class to abdicate their power once the commoners have been acclimatized to living without possessions. That's never going to happen, understanding Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're in a position where your basic needs will always be met, you're never going to relinquish that. You're never going to abdicate that. So there is no communism. It is only degrees of socialism. And socialism has killed more people throughout the history of the world than any other government. So when you see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who the best thing she could ever hope for outside of Congress is to basically have frat boys doing body shots off her belly. That's where she should be. But unfortunately, she is now the de facto leader of the Democrat Party, which brings me into the point that I wanted to make earlier about transitions within the Democrat Party. But she went on the record to say this, quote, "To me, what socialism means is to guarantee a basic level of dignity." I would like her to go to any socialist country. Go to North Korea. As a matter of fact, I will pay for your plane ticket. Go to North Korea. Go to Cuba, go to Venezuela, and tell me how many of those people actually have, to quote her, a basic level of dignity. This woman is too dumb to order a coffee, but yet she is an influencer within the Democrat Party.
But this is the failure of the Republican Party, whole cloth, because rather than focusing on growth, rather than inspiring people, the Democrats have spent the last 100 years building up an infrastructure to hide the rungs on the ladder to success. The ladder to success was very clear. The reason why socialism and communism didn't work during World War II was because the average American had so much upward mobility that trying to convince us to give up our future growth for a handout today, you must be crazy. I'm going to be a business owner tomorrow. You're not convincing me to give up that so that I can stand in a bread line today. Nowadays, the Democrats have hid, along with many neocons in the Republican Party and many corrupt officials in D.C. on both sides of the aisle, have hid the rungs on the ladder to success to where what? The average Gen Z American thinks they'll never own a house. Cars are now 12-year leases. 12 years to pay off a car. Interest rates are skyrocketing. The ability to afford anything, to own anything that you name your own is so beyond the pale. What do we have our young women doing when they graduate college with a degree in some weird social science that it has no grounding and foundation in reality? They go become an OnlyFans influencer where you can make $1 million showing your ass. That's what we have right now.
That's the basic level of dignity, right?
Yeah, you hide the rungs on the ladder to success so enough people go, you know what? I don't believe the ladder's there. I'll take the handout.
Mary, do you think this is the end of the Democrat Party? I mean, at least as we know it. The Democrat Party is never going to die off. It's just going to simply morph like a chameleon. It's going to hide its true colors. It's going to take on the color of its surrounding. And it's going to continue to try to offer voters something that it cannot and will not ever deliver upon.
Well, I don't know what's in store for the Democrat Party. I mean, back in FDR's time, there were conservative Democrats. Democrats were conservative, but he changed the nature of the party. I mean, he pressured, people running in the primaries to adopt his New Deal program. And, he's the one that basically is responsible for the leftward shift of the party. So, I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, is it going to go so socialist, that it collapses from the fact that it can't fulfill its promises and, just presents people with poverty and, havoc, as I think, New York City will be in. So, it's hard to tell, but, the trajectory of the Democratic Party, since the early 20th century has been to the left. And I think, excluding a place like New York City, we're seeing more and more young people, Latinos, Black people, coming to the Republican Party. I don't know what the thinking is of the Republicans in New York State. I think they pretty much written off New York City. It's been so Democrat, and maybe they're, using their resources where they, think they might be able to get some success. But, wouldn't it be great to have a Giuliani just sort of appear and, be elected? But it seems like we're in for some years of misery in New York, and I don't think I'll be going down there very much.
I'll tell you exactly what the New York GOP is thinking. They're thinking the same thing that Ronna McDaniel told me when I confronted her about this very same issue a few years back. At a Federation of Republican Women event, I asked her, what was your plan? The greatest generation, same thing I asked Tim Scott when he ran for president. The greatest generation and the baby boomers are dying off, which leaves Generation X and millennials like myself who are old enough to be alive prior to the computer, prior to the internet, prior to social media. Mm-hmm. What are you doing to reach out to new people? How are you going to go after young people? How are you going after Black men and Hispanic men who have shown a propensity to vote over here in the Republican Party? And I got told that's a waste of time. They'll never vote over here. We need to focus on turning out white men. Well, guess what? There's only so many white men in the country. A deep 40% of them are progressives or liberals. The rest of them are dying off, baby boomers and greatest generation. You only have so much growth that you can get within the white population of the United States. You have to go after minorities. Trump did it, but everybody else in the GOP has been reticent to try and go after it or to just do what Trump did. Everyone, instead of doing what Trump did, which is go directly into communities and offer an alternative to the socialists, the death, poverty, and destruction of the progressive, regressive Democrat Party, we offer what? Put down the 40 ounce, pull up your pants, turn off the rap music, get a job, stop being a lazy sack of shit.
So I pulled up some statistics. This is from the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. 63% of Jewish registered voters are enrolled as Democrats and 15% as Republicans. Okay. Now, I've had extensive conversations on my media with Ben Weingarten. Ben is a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. He's a fellow at the Claremont Institute, and he's a senior contributor for The Federalist, and he's a columnist at Newsweek and the Epoch Times. So, I mean, his experience, his resume as a journalist speaks for itself. It's not just somebody with an opinion. And I asked him once about this. I said, why do we tend to see so many Jewish voters in New York, especially New York City, that are leaning Democrat? And he said it's a very, very easy explanation. A concept called Tikkun Olam, which is literally world repair. And so this is part of a Jewish Reconstructionist movement that was spearheaded by Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan. And I want to read a quote from Rabbi Kaplan. Quote, "The Jewish protagonists of social idealism should realize that the Jewish religion came into being as a result of the first attempt to conceive of God as the defender of the weak against the strong, and that it can therefore continue to serve as the inspiration in the present struggle. The Reconstructionist movement has helped define the vanguard of social justice in the Jewish community, advancing causes from equality for women and LGBTQIA folks to policy-shifting advocacy work in multiracial interfaith coalitions. Leave the world a better place than what you found it. So this concept, and I think it is well intentioned, but the well intentioned concept of Tikkun Olam is being bastardized, and it's being pirated by people who are selling a false bill of goods. Moreover, you mentioned a very interesting term earlier. You said, as it related to Zoran Mamdani, that he was charming. And I will tell you that in the world of behavioral threat analysis, charm is a pre-attack indicator. Charm is not something, no, I'm being serious about this, because charm is not something you are. Charm is something that you do. It's a verb. It's not a noun. It's what you do. You charm people. People now are under your spell. We can all think about that person, you have a family member that's dating somebody and you're like, my God, that person is so fake. Oh my God, they're so charming. They're under a spell. It's as if these people are casting and weaving this spell, that these people are just, they're entranced and they follow along and they don't ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, he's Mamdani is in so many ways. When I think on it, like the young Franklin Roosevelt, never gives a straight answer. I mean, if you watch the last debate, he had hardly any specifics. He didn't explain how he was going to pay for everything. But yet he's up there smiling and acting very amiable and is drawing in all these young voters, especially, to vote for him. So, and it was the same thing with Franklin Roosevelt. I mean, he would say two contradictory things in one sentence, and he was seen as being this kind of like movie star, and reporters just had stars in their eyes when they talked to him. And I don't know what it is, but we need better education. We need to learn our history. We need to learn what happens when you implement these policies. You have a depression that lasts on and on.
Well, I'll tell you something. There is a depression that is about to last for as long as Mamdani manages to stay in office, because this is not going to end well for the city of New York. Mary Grabar, author of Debunking FDR, The Man and the Myths. I would encourage people to check that book out. Great book, by the way. And we'll get you back on again. So appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And that is going to do it for this week's edition of Granite State Live. I want to thank all of our guests, Daniel Richard, Tom Murray, Nils Gravilius, Mary Grabar, Julian, great to see you again this week, and the production team, thank you for everything that you do as well. We will be back here next week to do it all over again. God bless, stay safe, and remember, try to be nice to people. Civility does work. Take care, everybody.